Free speech includes the freedom to mock humorless liberals. It's the NewsBusters podcast. I'm Tim Graham, your executive editor. With me today, MRC VP for Free Speech, Dan Schneider, and our special guest, Seth Dillon, CEO of the Babylon Bee. Well, how many awards have we given him? We had the Bulldog Award in 2024. And you?
And, of course, the Free Speech Award in the inaugural year. Yep, Seth Dillon is a champion.
And, of course, I have to start with this, because one of my favorites was the headline, CNN purchases industrial-sized washing machine to spin news before publication. And one of the reasons it's my favorite is because people took it too dang seriously.
Yeah, that was in 2018 when we published that joke. That was right about the time when Facebook had started working with third-party fact checkers to stop the spread of misinformation. And you know, they were supposed to be fact checking things that were demonstrably false. Who trusts them to do that? Of course, they got that wrong a lot, but it was very bizarre to us when they started focusing on humor and giving jokes a truth rating. I would, if anything, maybe do that when a joke goes really viral because people thought it was true. Like it's really tapped into something. There's enough truth there to the satire that people are confused by it and think it's real. I don't know, whatever. If you want to fact check that, fine. But to do it with a joke like that, which is so obviously absurd, and threaten us with penalties if we continue to publish jokes like that, that just put us in like a headspin. We're like, I don't understand, what's going on here, and what do we do to deal with this problem? Because this was an absurd, obvious joke, and it's all we do is publish fake news like this, and we're being threatened with being kicked off the platform for doing it.
I believe it was Snopes.com that said, wait a minute. Now, I think your point's very good, which is that it's one thing to fact check it. It's just that the fact check always seems to come with the suppression.
Well, look, there's news, there's satire, and then there's also something in between. When Trump says, the line to get into this conference was 20 blocks long, or when he says for the 20th time, this is the most important thing that has happened in a millennia. Well, that's not satire.
Yeah,
it's exaggeration.
Yeah.
But anybody who takes him, who is it who said, if you take Trump literally, you'll get it wrong. But if you don't take him seriously, you're going to get it wrong.
Yeah,
he's serious about everything, but he's not literal about everything.
Yeah, that's true. But you're right, though, that the fact checking did always come with the suppression. It came with that tacked onto it. It wasn't just like, okay, this is. You can think of Community Notes is a good example of where this isn't the case. Community Notes is more speech and is an answer to speech that is, false or misleading or whatever. People can add a community note and it doesn't penalize the person who published the original post. It just provides additional context. You can complain about that if you want to, especially if it was a joke and you have this disclaimer attached to it saying, well, this is actually satire. Like, I think that kills the joke.
Yeah.
I don't like it, but at least it's not penalizing you in the sense that what they were doing with the fact checking was they were giving you they were down ranking your quality score.
Yeah.
If you were continually getting fact checked. So you would show up less in people's feeds. And if you're showing up less in people's feeds, you're just having less and less reach. And so, you say too many false things and then your voice gets quieter and quieter and quieter. And who gets to decide what's true and what's false anyway? So it was a bad system, and I'm glad we're getting away from it. And
amen.
I think at least in some part, I'm happy to have played at least some role in pushing back on that stuff and drawing attention to it and leading and building some momentum in the other direction.
Well, the sort of the other connected area is like when Gavin Newsom was trying to silence you because it was clearly satire, and I think the left would almost prefer truly false information rather than satire that makes them look foolish, and nobody on the right did that. They
really hate mockery.
Nobody on the right was doing that until you showed up, Seth. Am I wrong? Yeah. Was there somebody else who was doing that effectively?
No, not really very effectively. Over the years, I think, comedy has shifted quite a bit. Late night comedy, really moved to the point where it was very partisan and became unwatchable, in my opinion. You had The Onion. The Onion used to be fairly balanced and funny, and then they became more and more partisan and less funny because they were more narrative driven rather than just tapping into the truth for their humor. So there just weren't. Yeah, there still aren't. I mean, the Babylon Bee doesn't really have competition at the moment in the sense that there's just tons of conservative comedians out there doing like satire from this perspective.
You would know by checking fact-checking sites because
that's where you'd find them, right?
They will still say, we found a conservative satire site that has a Twitter account with 120 followers. They're going to go find it. I don't know if there are any fact checks on The Onion. There are, but they're very different. If you compare them side by side, it's actually really interesting to do a study on that. You have they'll rate an Onion joke and they'll say, well, this is false, but it's so obviously a joke. It's satire. It's funny. This came from The Onion, the greatest satire site ever. Oh. And then you read a Babylon Bee one and it's like, oh, they are trafficking in misinformation. They fooled people before with these ruses. And it's like, come on, you're assigning motives to us, ill motives to us, rather than just recognizing that we do satire from our own perspective. We just happen to have a different political viewpoint. Well, now we're at a point, Dan, where it's Newsom that's doing the humor. And obviously people on social media are like, excuse me, you wanted this banned.
Well, this is the point. The California law that was passed, and some referred to it as the Seth Dillon statute, trying to silence the Babylon Bee in California. It specifically, black letter law specifically exempted parody and satire from enforcement. But this is the problem. If you've got government agencies responsible, and of course all run by the left, responsible for determining whether something is satire or a little too close to the truth, so it's no longer protected by the statute. Instead, it's going to be fraud, like Seth Dillon is constantly engaged in.
That's such a good point, because of course our defense would be, well, this is satire. And they would say, no, it isn't. You're trafficking in misinformation under the guise of satire. That's what they've always said about us.
Yeah.
Yeah. Such a good point.
I will add, you commented on competition for the Babylon Bee, and I do mean this seriously. I think the stiffest competition for the Babylon Bee is Seth's other publication, Not the Bee. Because sometimes you can't distinguish between, wait, is this satire or is this an actual news story?
Yeah, that's my answer to who our top competition is. It's reality. We have to try to stay ahead of the curve, not of our competitors, but of reality itself. And that has become, at least now, I think things are easing up a little bit there. But if you go back just a few years ago, especially from 2020 to 2023, 2024, we were in a period there where some of the most insane things were being promoted from the top down through all the cultural and institutional power, wildly popular and trending, and it just felt like you were living in a South Park episode. And so the chief competitor to the Bee at that time was reality itself, and so many of our jokes were coming true. We call them fulfilled prophecies. I think we have like 122 or 124 now of these jokes that we've told that have come true, where they were eventually, a real headline came out that was just like one of our satirical headlines. But yeah, we feature a lot of those over on Not the Bee.
We had one, Seth, the only example I can think of with our Notable Quotables newsletter, we always had an April Fool's issue. Never as funny as the Babylon Bee, but we had... Newsweek had this horrible conventional wisdom watch box where they gave people up arrows and down arrows and said snarky things. And we did a Gorbachev up because he cracked down on somebody. Like, good for you, Gorby. And then he invaded Lithuania. And Newsweek literally gave him an up arrow. We couldn't believe it. So I was going to say this, though. I think in terms of conservative humor, satire, before the Bee, I think with the Ditto Heads have to throw in the Limbaugh parodies. Some of those were absolute classics. At least at that time, people wanted some of that. People making fun of James Carville, for and picking on Kenneth Starr, and then they had Kenneth Starr being, very mellow, like, well, I don't know. And Carville's saying, Kenneth Starr's a space alien selling cigarettes to the children, So conservatives need that.
Good.
Conservatives need it.
Yeah, they do. And I'm glad the Bee is able to kind of fill that void.
Yes, one of the more recent ones that's too funny was Hitler brings peace to Israel.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that was that's one of those ones where we did a Not the Bee headline. It was so similar to that because that is literally what happened is you had a man who's referred to repeatedly by the media as Hitler is able to accomplish this peace agreement for Israel, for the sake of Israel. And that was reported as real news on Not the Bee, like the day after it was reported as satire on the Bee. And I'm like, okay, this is, we're overlapping a little bit too much here between these sites.
Well, we check out the big tech media aggregators and AI as well. And Meta AI gave credit to Joe Biden for bombing the Iran nuclear facility.
What?
And gave credit to Joe Biden for putting pressure on Hamas, even though what Joe Biden was doing was putting pressure on Israel by denying resources to Israel.
Joe Biden was asleep on the beach somewhere. I don't know where that's coming from. Yeah, these things hallucinate, don't they? They just get it wrong, and they tend to get it wrong in one direction, which is interesting.
Yeah.
This always seems to happen. Computers, so dumb. I mean, this is one of the things you guys have really been doing is looking at AI and how AI mangles things. And it's kind of scary because anybody who's searching Google, they're going to want to throw you their AI version of what your search means.
Well, Google highlights the most radical sites. They've trained their model on things like Wikipedia, which of course is now just a cesspool of radicalism. And then like on Israel, it's going to mostly be the BBC and NPR. I mean, NPR, stateside, it was the very worst when it comes to Israel.
National Palestine Radio.
It was horrific. It was horrific.
Yeah, and the BBC, it really is horrendous. I mean, the exposés have been there multiple times, just how receptive they are to Hamas messaging. Let's go back for a second, Seth, to that crazy period under Biden. Alex Christie said you really should bring this up. Babylon Bee found its entire account locked for 12 hours in March of 2022 for its article calling Rachel, a.k.a. Richard Levine, its Man of the Year.
Oh, we were locked up for a lot longer than that.
Oh, well, that was probably an early report from us.
Yeah, it might have been. That might have been when it first happened. We wrote that joke in response to the real headline where, Rachel Levine had been named Woman of the Year by USA Today. And it's just one of those crazy examples of a real headline that's like, okay, this reads like satire already. You got a man in a dress and you're calling him Woman of the Year. How do you make that funnier than it already is? It's already kind of hysterical that this is something we're taking seriously. So we decided that, the most creative thing that we could come up with was, well, let's just kind of flip this on its head. We'll be a little provocative. We'll name Rachel Levine our pick for Man of the Year and deliberately misgender. I say misgender in scare quotes because we're actually properly gendering a male person. And of course, we actually knew when we told that joke, we were aware of the fact that telling a joke like that would come with penalties. We knew that the radical gender ideology had been baked into the terms of service so that it was an enforceable policy violation if you challenge it, even with a joke. And so we did have a discussion up front about whether we should publish that joke, because if we do, it could harm our business. This is how we drive traffic to the site. This is how we monetize the site. This is our business. And so if we're just reckless in the sense of, okay, let's just be provocative for the sake of being provocative, we can get ourselves booted from a major platform and actually make less money, have less revenue to pay our employees. We'll jeopardize our own business. And we did decide to go ahead and publish it anyway, because we felt like it's very important for us to be willing to tell the jokes they don't want you to tell, and push back on these sacred cows that they're trying to protect so fiercely. Because if we don't do that, then these things will only continue to become more entrenched, more guarded, and you'll have, less freedom over time. It will erode even further. And so we thought we'd be derelict in our duty if we didn't, knowing that it might come at a cost. And so we published the joke, and then we got locked out. We got this notice saying that we could be reinstated as soon as we wanted to. We just needed to basically delete the tweet and check a box admitting that we engaged in hateful conduct. And just like we weren't willing to bite our tongue with publishing it in the first place, we also weren't willing to take that down and say, basically censor ourselves and say, oh, we're sorry, we told this joke, it was hateful. We weren't willing to do that either, even though it was required to get our account back. So we talked about that and made a decision very quickly. So it was really two things there. And I distinguish often between the hard censorship of them taking your content down and the soft censorship of people shutting their own mouths and refusing to speak because they know there might be some penalty if they do. And that's what this whole system was rigged to do, was produce soft censorship where people do the tyrant's work for him. And we wanted no part in that. We felt very strongly that this is the right thing to do, even if it comes at a cost. And that maybe, just maybe, will embolden other people. Maybe we will start some kind of change. Maybe we will have some kind of impact on this conversation. We don't want to just martyr ourselves just recklessly, but something's got to change. And so it was Elon Musk. That's actually what caught his attention, was our suspension. And of course, that whole story. He eventually went on to buy the platform, and day one set the Babylon Bee free. So we did end up having an impact on that conversation as a result. We had no idea that we would. As far as we knew, we were giving up that platform forever. So that was a big moment in the Bee's history. And it was pretty amazing to have Elon come along and bail us out of Twitter jail.
Yeah.
So look, this is Free Speech Week. We're having Seth Dillon on because he is a champion for free speech. It's because of the sort of decisions and work he has just described and other similar things that Seth was in our inaugural class of MRC Free Speech Award winners. And there's a particularly important point that he has made, which is connected to this award. There are lots of people who exercise their First Amendment free speech rights. Exercising those rights exceptionally is not what we look for in deciding who gets the award. This award goes to people who are actively fighting for the free speech rights of others. Seth Dillon has done that. And of course, this year's award winner, Charlie Kirk, he fits that same mold. Yes, he exercised those free speech rights very, very effectively. But if that's all he had done, he wouldn't be the award winner this year. It's because he was such a champion for free speech rights. He tried to protect the rights of everybody to speak, including, maybe even especially, those who disagreed with him.
That's a pretty rare thing, too, by the way, because you have whether you're looking at the left or the right, everybody loves the idea of people who agree with them having freedom to speak. We all love it when people who say things that we like to hear are free to speak. But on both sides, doesn't matter where you land, there's a tremendous amount of resistance to letting people who say things that you don't like, really awful things, really nasty things, even potentially harmful things, as long as they stop short of being unlawful, there's a tremendous amount of resistance to allowing speech that we don't like to be spoken and heard. Our first tendency isn't to just kind of tune out or say, I'm not going to listen to that person. Our first tendency is to say that shouldn't be allowed to be said. And I think it's a tremendous mistake to err on the side of censorship instead of on the side of freedom. Let people advance their bad ideas and then respond to them, with ridicule or refutation, or just ignore them and tune out if you want to. But I think bad ideas need to be confronted head on, and the proper answer to them is to not to censor them, but to address them directly. So, Charlie embodied that spirit himself. He was more than willing. You never saw Charlie. There were events where he just gave speeches, but most of the time when you saw Charlie was holding a microphone, but he was also extending one to somebody else.
Absolutely. And I don't think there's a whole lot of that going on the left. I think they've tried that to some degree, but everything we're used to, they're not used to left-wingers having to deal with conservative counterpoints. I mean, the news media today, I remember when you would go on Fox or MSNBC or CNN and a conservative would debate a liberal. It's pretty rare now. I mean, Fox still does it with its own stable of contributors, but there's just not a lot of, I don't do anything where I get to own the lib on cable like you might have done back in the day. But yeah, I mean, Charlie changed minds.
Yeah, but getting back to the basic principle that Seth was describing, I remember growing up, the side that was constantly talking about free speech, free expression was the left.
Yes.
The ACLU, we're going to defend the KKK. We may hate what they say, but we'll die for to protect their rights to say it. And the left was the great champion of that. I don't think the right was opposed to those things. It just wasn't a big issue for the right.
Well, the left, to some degree, as I recall, one of the things that they were very bold about free speech was for, people saying really rude things about Christians or, nasty, using profanity. Obviously, the FCC used to say you can't use the 7 dirty words. And the Lenny Bruces of the world were out there saying, well, we really should. Yeah.
Getting arrested for saying it on a stage.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the left now, there's when I look at Congress, House and Senate, there's only one Democrat, only one in both chambers who will even articulate a basic First Amendment free speech principle. That's Ro Khanna of California. The last time he articulated that principle was maybe 2.5 years ago. He was immediately chastised by his leadership, and he has been mum on First Amendment free speech issues ever since.
Well, and a big driver of that is the philosophy that the left has adopted that centers so much on what do you want to call it? Safetyism, just safe space culture. The idea that speech is even humor is harmful, and that we need to protect people's feelings by safeguarding them, even from facts that might make their feelings hurt. Oh, well, you're actually a boy, not a girl. Oh, well, that makes me sad, so you can't say that.
Right. Right.
We had that on CNN. I still remember where I think it was Shermichael Singleton, where Abby Phillip was lecturing him not to use obviously correct gender terminology because the other guest over here finds that very hateful.
Right.
Facts first, course, CNN.
There were a lot of people that, everyone was perfectly willing to offend. Of course, Christians, white people, men, you can have all these categories of people that were, you can make fun of them all you want. But it was the woke worldview that divided everybody into the oppressed and oppressor categories. And so if you land in the oppressed categories, you're marginalized and you're powerless. Then people shouldn't even be allowed to joke about you. They can't hurt your feelings. There's certain things they shouldn't be allowed to say. So it became more of this thing where the principle wasn't, we need to honor liberty. We need to honor freedom. We need to let people say things that even if we don't like them. The principle became all about safeguarding the certain feelings of certain people in order to achieve some kind of equity in society because of this imbalance. And so that was the infection, the mind virus, as Elon Musk puts it, of wokeness. That really brought that to the point where over the course of the last several years, speech was restricted to the point where that joke ended up getting us kicked off Twitter.
Well, speaking of wokeness, it always reminds me of one of my favorite topics, which is book bans, because librarians very much control what content comes into schools or what content comes into public libraries. And the librarians will have banned books week, and they'll talk about books that the stupid white people want banned or they find too offensive for their 12-year-olds. What's not discussed is the books we shall not let into the library, like Abigail Schreier on transgenderism, books like that. They're like, oh, well, we're not letting them in, but they're not going to sell them in banned books week and promote them because they're the ones doing the banning. So by their definition of banning.
Right. Yeah, when they ban a book, they're protecting you from harm. And when someone else wants to keep a book out of the hands of children, for example, they're engaged in censorship. And this needs to be, it's just amazing. That is the weirdest thing, how wokeness will end up defending things like drag shows for kids and some of these sexually explicit books for children. They go out of their way to safeguard that expression, which That's where it gets really wild, is when you start thinking, okay, so you don't really like free speech. There's all kinds of speech that's offensive to you, and you're trying to protect people's feelings. But this really sick, depraved sexual stuff, you want it in front of kids. That's what you're willing to die, that you're willing to die on that hill to protect that speech. Just a total moral inversion, inversion.
Okay, so the left has not only forgotten about the First Amendment, they have replaced it. They have replaced the First Amendment with a set of restrictions against the majority of Americans. They've completely inverted the First Amendment. That's why you cannot find anybody on the left side of the aisle in Congress who will talk about free speech rights. When they talk about free speech, if you listen to them, they'll talk about how we have to censor, misinformation, malinformation to save the First Amendment.
Or their idea of free speech is, oops, Jimmy Kimmel got suspended for 4 days, which is like the worst, concentration camp, event. I mean, and and even worse than that, Seth, is that when they will. Jimmy Kimmel obviously was suspended for a lie that the assassin of Charlie Kirk was a MAGA guy, and then they'll hail him for, guess what? Speaking truth to power.
Right. Yeah, I do worry, though. We do talk a lot about the left and how they've flipped on the speech issue over the years and have become so authoritarian and controlling, punishing thought crimes and speech they don't like. But I have seen a concerning amount of willingness to go in that direction on the right as well. And I don't know if you've noticed it, but in the wake of Charlie's death, I heard a lot of people on X, where I spend a lot of my time online, just kind of keeping up with the conversation. I heard a lot of people saying, well, we had principles. We stood on our principles. Charlie was standing on the principle that we should be able to speak freely, that there should be this marketplace of ideas that we contend with the other side in, and everybody has their say, and we hash it out, and may the best ideas win. We tried that, and it got him killed. And it doesn't work when you're dealing with opposition that doesn't have the same principles, that doesn't value free speech. They think that our speech is violence, and so they counter it with real violence. They actually attack us and try to take us out. And so something's got to give. We got to fight fire with fire. We can't continue to play. It's like having one hand tied behind our back. We're disadvantaged and disabled when we try to operate from the basis of these principles. It's not an even playing field. It's asymmetrical. I've heard that a lot. I don't know if you've heard that, but the call seems to be for, okay, well, if free speech isn't really, if free speech doesn't work and it has this consequence of them resorting to violence, then forget free speech. We'll just impose what we think you're allowed to say and be domineering and use force to control what you're allowed to think and say in the public square. I've seen a rising tendency on the right to adopt that way of thinking, and I get pushed back all the time. And so now I'm fighting with the right about free speech. And so I think we need to keep in mind, this is a very important, I'll let you guys comment on what I just said in a second, but we really need to keep in mind that the reason they wanted that this disturbed young man wanted to kill Charlie Kirk is because Charlie was so effective. He was, as you said before, changing minds. What he was doing was working. Engaging in the marketplace of ideas is wildly effective when you do it as intelligently and articulately as, Charlie did, for sure. It's wildly effective. And so the fact that someone resorted to violence to take Charlie out, first of all, they did it because he was effective. So that's a strategy we should be willing to emulate. But they also only amplified his voice by trying to silence it. More people have seen his videos. More people have heard the gospel. Like, Charlie has become so much louder and amplified as a result of this. Now, of course, his life was cut short. That's tragic. It's tragic for him. It's tragic for his family. And that's terrible. But there are, God can bring good out of these things, and they do often backfire. All the attempts to suppress us have only raised and amplified our voice. So we have to keep that in mind. This is not a situation where we're losing so badly we have to abandon our principles to try to win again. And how do you win by abandoning your principles anyway?
Yeah, I mean, the media research.
I threw a lot at you there, but
yeah, but the Media Research Center, Brent Bozell, we were making videos for our supporters many years ago, And our appeal was not let's shut up the libs. It was basically like, if the liberal media would allow conservatives a chance to speak, we'll win. They're afraid we're going to win, so they won't give us equal time. And obviously, we would share your thought that what we're doing here is we're being conservatives for free speech, not just for us, not just when good things happen, but
for everybody.
For everybody at all times.
So let me pile on here but I'll put it in this context. Anytime an organization gives an award to somebody, like when the MRC gave Seth Dillon an award, there's always a risk that in the coming years, this awardee will actually turn on you. Like Liz Cheney or something. But so Seth Dillon has demonstrated why, yet again, in our eyes, he remains a great champion for free speech. Let me give you 2 or 3 examples. Right after Charlie's assassination, our own Attorney General came out saying how she needed to punish hate speech. And we at the Media Research Center and others, including Charlie, not Charlie, but including his other allies of Charlie, came out quickly saying, no, people who want to say ugly, nasty things about Charlie, they are still free to do so. They may get fired by their employers, but no, we are not going to punish people. We're not going to say that they should be debanked. We're not going to say that they should be banned from the public square. They just need to suffer their own private consequences when they say horrible things. And Bondi she never actually fully retracted what she said, but what she said was really bad. But other examples, and at the moment I'm forgetting the name of the company, 2 people founded this company as an alternative to GoFundMe, because GoFundMe was silencing conservatives. So this
Give, Send, Go, is it that one?
That's it. What's the name of it again?
Give, Send,
Give,
Go.
Send, Go.
Give, Send, Go.
Yeah.
So they founded Give, Send, Go to be a pro-free speech platform for people to be able to donate money. Okay, well, recently there were some people on the left who took advantage of the company, and people on the right were demanding that that the lefties be deplatformed. And the founder said, no, it's a free speech platform. And they've taken heat on the right. But good for them. Free speech means freedom, whether you like the person or not.
Right. Yeah, and the hate speech thing is always tricky because, the right was fighting against these hate speech things for a long time because it was our speech that was considered hateful. We were considered intolerant and we were considered bigots just because we were pushing back on whatever critical race theory or gender ideology or whatever. And so we were fighting against the hate speech thing. To hear somebody, to hear Pam Bondi go out there and say, well, we're going to, if you spout off hate speech, we're going to come after you. We're going to target you. Well, no, you can't do that constitutionally. You can say that, but you certainly can't do it constitutionally. The First Amendment won't allow it. You're allowed to say awful things. You're allowed to say mean things. You're allowed to hurt people's feelings. And it's terrible when people do that intentionally, but it's lawful. You're allowed to do that. That's what freedom involves. And the best way to respond to that is with more speech. And so we have to consistency is really key on this stuff. It makes us look so silly if we're principled up until we have power and then we jettison the principles. That's just so those aren't real principles. Then it was just a pragmatic strategy where you were pretending to have principles to get power and then you jettison them. Come on.
If we are Americans, we believe in the First Amendment in part because our founders put that aside or put that together for us. That's conservative. Conserving what we actually put in the Bill of Rights should be something every conservative is for. Well, I thank you for coming today. We'll keep celebrating Free Speech Week, and you got to come to Free Speech America for that, and NewsBusters once, twice, 24 times a day. Thanks for listening.